I've seen a lot of my friends just suffering because their work is so prominent and they've struggled for 10 years or more trying to get their style just to see someone else wearing their face and parading it, right?
There is nothing stopping AI companies from taking whatever you own from the internet, downloading it, and putting it into their training model. Nothing, really.
We're putting the whole creative future of humanity at risk here.
In the last couple of weeks, I spoke to many amazing artists and scientists about my mixed feelings of generative AI. Join me to hear their thoughts, my advice to creators, and predictions on what's to come. I will be perfectly honest with you. I am equally fascinated and terrified by generative AI. As a graphic designer, illustrator, and educator, I try to stay on top of any new technology and tool that helps self-expression and creativity. I still remember the first time I saw the potential in AI used for creating art. It was in 2018 when I saw the examples Scott Eaton achieved using his model trained exclusively on his own photography dataset from his Bodies in Motion project. I never thought that by 2024 we will have tools like Midjourney that can generate photorealistic images indistinguishable from real photos or art, and tools like OpenAI's Sora capable of generating ultra-realistic videos from text prompts. By now, most likely you are familiar with how AI images are generated, but in case you are not, let me give you a very brief and extremely simplified summary. You type in a few words, your prompt, describing what you want to see, and the AI model generates images for you that never existed before. For this process to work well, the AI model needs to be trained on a massive amount of images and their descriptions. At the moment, the most effective and most widely used dataset, Leon 5B, includes 5.85 billion uncurated images crawled from publicly available websites and cloud storages. This dataset was meant for research purposes only, but companies started to utilize it commercially within a few months after its release. There are all kinds of images in this dataset, from public domain pictures to a staggering amount of copyrighted work of both dead and living artists, and a fair amount of explicit content too. The creators of this dataset didn't get consent from anyone while collecting these images. There was no opt-in or opt-out, but since it was meant for research purposes only, it didn't seem to violate anyone's rights. You can get a better idea of the effectiveness and sheer amount of scraping that was used to generate Leon 5B dataset by going to haveibeentrained.com website. You can search the entire training data using someone's name, a domain name, or even a keyword. For instance, you can find out how many images of elephants were scraped off the internet, and you can start to see why AI models can generate images of elephants from any angle and in any artistic style. This is like scanning someone's brain to see how well they remember how an elephant looks. Only artists with extraordinary visual memory, like the late Kim Jung-gi, can come close to this level of familiarity and comprehension of a subject matter. Without going into the technicalities of how deep learning and stable diffusion works, here are some important things to understand about text-to-image generative AI models. They are designed to generate new images similar to what they have seen during their training. Once a model is trained on an image, it cannot unsee it. It is a bit like human memory, but much more accurate and extensive. A bit like photographic memory paired with unlimited storage capacity. To improve the speed of the generation process, all images that are fed into the AI model are compressed. Now, this compressed form of the image, or latent image, looks like noise to us, but the model is capable of reversing it back to a recognizable, almost identical image as the original input. This transformation between the original image and the recovered image after the diffusion process is crucial, as this is used as an excuse by AI companies to get around existing copyright laws and to allow them to cheat artists out of their rightful compensation. You may have heard of the term data laundering. It involves transforming stolen data so that it can be used for legitimate purposes. In this instance, the original data, 5.85 billion images, was collected from the web by non-profit research groups and then shared with for-profit companies.
Most people who are having the AI discussion are unfortunately starting from a business-first mindset. So all of the ideas, all of the discussion about what should be legal, what should not be legal, our discussions are sort of framed around companies that want to scale up to the millions to billions of dollars of revenue, right? And if you're going to be that kind of company, I don't think you can just have a charismatic CEO at the top who thinks that they have perfectly understood the future of technology and that for some reason thinks their fair-handed handling of this situation is going to assure the best outcomes for everybody. No, you need boards that are made up of actual artists, right? Not just technology people who stumbled upon a code that happens to make art. You need people who are really sort of outside of the situation, real stakeholders, to help guide these organizations.
Creators of Midjourney, one of the most popular text-to-image generators, have been recently caught discussing laundering copyrighted images whilst training their AI model. Many scientists who worked on developing AI technologies are also disillusioned by the predatory practices of AI companies used to harm individuals and entire industries.
There is nothing stopping AI companies from taking whatever you own from the internet, downloading it, and putting it into their training model. Nothing, really. There's no legal statute standing in the way. There's no regulatory agencies that say this is not allowed.
But why is it such a big deal, you might ask, that AI models have been trained on copyrighted materials? How does this affect the original artists? Remember what happened to the music industry when Napster first came out, and then with pretty much every other intellectual property once file sharing or torrent sites became available. I'm talking about movies, TV shows, books, software, games, etc. Although pirated content is still widely available, most industries found ways to combat it, mainly by streaming their content. The main difference, however, is that while torrent sites have been hurting mainly large companies and brands, generative AI is hurting individuals. What is worse is that generative AI didn't just steal artists' work, it was created in order to replace them. Since we are comparing AI systems to torrent sites, it's as if you can not only download the last season of your favorite show, but even generate any number of new episodes or seasons without the consent and input of the show's creators.
If they were marketing a commercial product that was solely based on people who opted in, they wouldn't have a very competitive product. They wouldn't have a product that would compete directly with artists, right? And they want to tell people it's a tool and it's a tool for artists, but it's not. It's meant as a replacement for artists because they're trying to directly compete with artists in the same market, right? That is not a tool, that is a replacement. The only way to have a very competitive, extremely competitive product that has the best imagery is to scrape from everyone and anyone.
One of the main arguments of people using generative AI tools is that their generated images only look similar to existing real artwork that was used to train the AI models. They compare this ability of mimicking other people's work to how artists find inspiration and references. Here is what Lois von Barle, or Loish, wrote about this. Many have compared image generators to human artists seeking out inspiration. These two are not the same. My art is literally being fed into these generators through the datasets and spat back out of a program that has no inherent sense of what is respectful to artists. As long as my art is literally integrated into the system used to create the images, it is commercial use of my art without my consent. There are dedicated websites like this one to help people easily copy any artist style using Midjourney. You can consider these style catalogs for people who are lazy to even research and get to know the artist they would want to copy. Bobby Chiu put it this way in his video.
AI's ability to copy my style is kind of like after I spend all this effort to climb a mountain, once I get to the top, everyone else just pops up with taking selfies on top of this mountain right beside you. And you know that if you didn't climb the mountain, then none of the others could either. Yet the only compensation that's given is to the AI company, even though without my artwork as well, none of this would be possible.
they're just looking at something and they're thinking, that looks cool. Who did that? I'm going to keep prompting stuff by lowish, right? Then that's not, you're not learning anything. You're just kind of, you know, it's cool. You don't understand why it's cool. And you just kind of want to keep generating more of it. So that to me feels like you're not really benefiting from anything. You're kind of just, you know, pulling the slot machine for more results. But I've seen a lot of my friends just suffering because their work is so prominent and they struggled for 10 years or more trying to get their style just to see someone else wearing their face and parading it, right?
You might wonder what happens if you want to mimic a specific, less-known artist style and Midjourney doesn't recognize their name when you are using it in your prompts. Well, Midjourney recently introduced a feature called Consistent Styles, which makes it even easier to mimic anyone's style. Let me demonstrate this quickly. Here are some illustrations my good friend George Tonks created. Using one or two of these as style references, Midjourney can closely emulate George's style, and the whole process takes less than a minute. Within an hour, anyone can generate hundreds of detailed illustrations in George's unique artistic style. What this means is that even if his work wasn't scraped in the first place and used to train the AI model, the uploaded style references will help to identify similar artwork in the database and use that to generate something very similar. I don't know if the uploaded images by the user are then automatically added to the AI model's training data, but I'm pretty sure they are used in some way to improve it. If that is the case, then users become complicit in data laundering without their knowledge. Here is what Patrick Brown has to say about style mimicry when I confronted him with generated images using Midjourney's consistent style feature.
When I saw this, I was kind of surprised, very shocked. Each of these were probably just made within seconds compared to if I was to draw something like this, maybe like this one. I would spend probably at least 3 days probably pulling this together, maybe 4 or 5, including the background for sure. Like that background, very detailed. You know, it does look very AI-ish, but to the average eye, I think it would just pass as the usual kind of Spider-Man artwork, or just a piece you would have thought that it would have been done by an artist. So it's very scary, and I don't like that side of AI, to be honest. Especially when you aim at a certain artist and say, hey, I want to get this style, and then create a full picture and out of thin air. It really does suck to have your name or your art style kind of siphoned off and like put through a filter and generated and spit it out in a few seconds, you know.
There is a short paragraph about stealing someone's intellectual property in Midjourney's terms of service. If you knowingly infringe someone else's intellectual property and that costs us money, we are going to come find you and collect that money from you. We might also do other stuff, like try to get a court to make you pay our legal fees. Don't do it. Sam Does Arts explained the dangers of AI imitating anyone's work.
When AI generations are made to look like an artist's work, this has the potential for reputation damage, for forgery, for fraud, for identity theft. And what's most concerning is that when these models are trained on images of your artwork, they are unable to forget. So almost all of these models are now working with tainted data. Their generations now all involve copyrighted content which has been gathered without the knowledge or permission of the copyright owner. It is directly hurting artists who have put their passion and their soul into everything that they create, only for their work to be scraped from the internet without their permission and used in training AI models.
The unfortunate paradox is that the more distinct an artist's style is, the more successfully AI can mimic it. Additionally, the more complex and detailed an artwork is, the more likely people will think it is made by AI, even when it's not. So generated images mimicking someone's style is not only plagiarizing the artist, but also makes people doubt the authenticity of any future or past work created by the artist.
I've been looking at art for, I don't know, the past 20 years or so in my life, and yeah, sure, sometimes there are dead giveaways about like, oh, it's too smooth or it does this and that, but like for what you're showing here, especially with their consistency update, it's scary. Like it's truly scary. You take someone like Gabs, for example, and you just want to emulate his style. You want it for a cover, you want it for an illustration for a movie poster, right? You take a few more examples, double it, triple the amount that you use for consistency, and all of a sudden you have even better results. So I think it's tremendously scary because it's so good.
This AI ethics spectrum demonstrates really well how exact style mimicry is ethically and morally the worst thing you can use generative AI for, especially when used to profit commercially from the generated images. Dana Rao, Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Chief Trust Officer at Adobe, said this in his interview with Nilay Patel from The Verge.
There's no such thing as style protection in copyright law right now. That you can't protect that. That's not a concept. So we've introduced in the same set of testimony you referred to earlier, this idea of a federal anti-impersonation right. And the idea of that is it would give artists a right to enforce against people who are intentionally impersonating their work for commercial gain.
Is it still possible to share anything online without worrying about feeding a generative AI model with your work? Ben Zhao, professor of computer science, and his team at the University of Chicago created two interesting tools that can help protect your digital images stored online.
So Nightshade is trying to help give some power back to the content owners against people who don't care about licensing, who don't care about ownership, who don't care about copyright. It is a small poison pill you can put inside your art. It works very similar to Glaze, except where Glaze is modifying what the AI model sees in terms of artistic style. Nightshade works by changing what the AI model sees in terms of composition. So instead of seeing a cow in a green pasture, it sees a big leather handbag sitting on a grassy hill, right? So each art piece can be equipped with a small poison pill in such a way that if enough of it gets collected and gets trained by the same model, then that model will start to get very confused about what is a cow. It will think that a cow has a nice leathery handle and, shiny buckles and those kind of things.
AI is not only saturating the internet with unreliable, fake content that's free to access, but also in the form of paid content. Here is an example of a fake art book that is advertised as a compelling and extensive guidebook on drawing people. But in reality, it is a collection of generated images and generated text with close to zero value to anyone interested in learning to draw. Fellow YouTuber Jazza Draws made a video about this.
It just goes to show the moral, ethical ambiguity of AI now and how it's impacting artists. I could have paid that $95 to the people whose style that was based on or it was used. I might have bought J. Scott Campbell How to Draw book, I've bought some of those.
I am pretty sure this is just one of many examples of fake books out there. Just imagine you are learning to drive and you get scammed to learn from a fake book, or you get a storybook for your child that turns out to be AI generated with hidden flaws that will secretly influence your child's imagination or understanding of the world. Oh, wait, this already happened. How can you protect yourself from fake books? Only by being extremely vigilant. But it is going to get harder and harder to differentiate generated books from real ones as AI models and workflows improve. But it's not just books. There are all kinds of generated digital products already out there. Sites like ArtStation are full of stuff like this. Massive collections of image references of something very specific like a stylized werewolf head. There is a small mention that this product is made with the help of AI, meaning it's nothing more than a library of curated generated images. At least here, they were not lying about the use of AI. Stock sites are also flooded with generated images. To see the scale of proliferation, it's worth checking the ratio between real images compared to generated images on some of the popular stock sites. Shutterstock, for instance, currently has around 5 million AI-generated images, which sounds like a lot, but it only amounts to 1.15% of its entire library. Compared to this, FreePic went all in with AI images. a staggering 42.7% out of their 121 million stock images are generated. I have to give it to them though that they are being completely transparent about this, and they make it super convenient to filter for AI images, even based on which model they were generated in and whether their original prompt is available or not. Out of the 400 million stock images currently on Adobe Stock, 10.1% are AI generated. Contributors have to indicate if their image was created using AI tools and whether people or property in the images are fictional. Here is one of their guidelines for generative AI content. Don't submit content created using prompts containing other artists' names or created using prompts otherwise intended to copy another artist. The most interesting thing is that Adobe decided to train their generative model, Adobe Firefly, on a unique dataset made up of Adobe stock images, along with openly licensed work and public domain content where copyright has expired. iStock by Getty Images also introduced their own generative AI solution in September 2023, partnering with NVIDIA, which, similarly to Adobe Firefly, was exclusively trained on their own stock library. These two examples, Adobe and Getty, prove that generative AI models can work without stealing billions of images and being transparent about their training data. Large stock sites like these were in a unique position that they were sitting on a goldmine from a deep learning point of view. They have a huge library of mostly high quality and high resolution images with descriptive titles and tags added by the contributors to make their images easier to find. At the moment, when comparing Adobe Firefly with Midjourney, for instance, it's a clear win in most cases for Midjourney in terms of the quality and realism of the output. However, Adobe is undeniably the more ethical model out of the two. Flipnormals is another great example of a digital marketplace aimed at 3D artists, where the founders Morten and Henning made it clear that contributors can upload and sell a wide variety of content as long as it's not AI generated. Any AI art uploaded, even if given away for free, will be taken down. Relying mainly on generative AI to make money is not going to last long, even if the creator is going to try to hide the fact that they used AI. On one hand, it is unethical. Using Midjourney is similar to using torrent sites. Selling work heavily relying on generated images is even worse, however. It is like selling stuff that you downloaded from torrent sites. The creators of AI tools are not directly involved in the act of plagiarism, they only provide the framework or vehicle for it. On the other hand, art created with AI is super accessible. Anyone can do it, which means pretty much everyone will use it eventually. It reminds me of Google and other search engines when they first came out in the mid-90s, and using them to find answers to your questions was like magic. It seemed like a unique skill for a while, but then it became the norm, and now it is as normal to use a search engine as breathing. Having amazing cameras on our mobile devices didn't automatically turn all of us into professional photographers. Also, randomly taking thousands of photos every day may still not result in any outstanding images. Generating images, videos, music, 3D objects, and everything else that will be possible in the future will quickly lose its novelty and hype, and the value of generated art will plummet. Jake Parker calls generative AI a new and incredibly successful form of industrialized art, where quantity, affordability, and speed is the priority over quality and skill. Previous successful examples of industrialized art are stock sites, Fiverr, and social media platforms like Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok. The companies behind social platforms are baiting users with pretty pictures and videos, harvesting their attention and selling it to advertisers. They are serving up compact thumbnail-sized art on a conveyor belt. What's worse is that these social platforms are already saturated with AI images, and soon AI videos will follow, turning them into a minefield if you are looking for authentic content. Compared to these other examples of industrialized art, generative AI takes things to a whole new level. It is a peak example of consumerism. It's like the fast food version of art. It's available to everyone, it's cheap, but it is not good for you. While fast food is negatively affecting your physical condition, AI art is affecting your mind and how you perceive things that you see. Looking at generated images is numbing your senses and distorting your perception of reality. Remember when a piece of art was experienced by staring at it for several minutes and appreciating all its details and imperfections, trying to learn its meanings and mysteries, the thoughts and emotions the artist was trying to capture. Generative images, on the other hand, serve our impatient society perfectly. We are high-wired or trained to think that looking at anything for more than 2 seconds feels like a waste of time. And to be frank, that is actually true about most AI art.
What humans want is like the shortcut. Like biologically, we don't want to do work, we don't want to do hard things because, well, I mean, we burn more calories, and if we don't have to, we don't want to do that.
If there was a pill that overnight you would get jacked, you would go from being a skinny or a fat guy to like actually like Henry Cavill in The Witcher kind of level. And you'd be like, sweet, now it's done. I don't have to spend 10 years of my life and 5 hours at a gym per day. Like you would just be there. And it's almost like we have that. If you have a button to get jacked with in art, like what's the point of things, right?
The real appreciation of art comes from valuing the process of the artist. Not just the time and effort it took them to create a specific piece of art, but their entire life experience. Generative AI removes the process from creation and makes people believe that it offers a shortcut to acquire artistic skills and experience. The actual act of taking a great photo requires much less time than creating a painting of the same subject, and it could also be considered a shortcut to achieve the same composition. However, taking great photos still relies on a lot of skills and practice compared to writing a prompt. Imagine that you have an idea for a painting and you describe it to your friend. You also tell her that you don't think you have the time or skills to create it, but you would love to see someone else painting it. Next time you meet, your friend shows you a painting that closely resembles what you described. She tells you that your idea inspired her and that she worked on it for several days. Now, would you consider yourself to be the artist in this situation? This is the same relation between a user and a generative AI tool, where the AI is the friend who does the actual work based on your prompt. Another way to think about this is to imagine a game, where you have two options in the main menu: to start the game or to see the end of the game. The first option would require you to spend dozens of hours of playtime to reach the ending. If you decide to choose the second option, you could save all that time and effort, but would the ending mean anything to you then? Not only you wouldn't fully understand what's happening, but you wouldn't have any emotional ties to any of the characters or events. Is AI art not just a new type of digital art, which when it first became available was considered to be a shortcut to creating art and was looked down on by traditional artists? Most people had the misconception of digital art being somewhat similar to generative images, where you just push a few buttons and a great image pops out. But compared to AI art, digital art is made by hand and requires a lot of skill to do well. Most AI artists already look at traditional and digital artists as dinosaurs and saying generative AI is just another tool and those who won't embrace it will fall behind. What most of them don't realize is that without an AI tool, they wouldn't be able to even come close to their generated images, while pre-AI artists would be able to make amazing art pretty much with any tool you put in their hands.
Some people who have been into generative AI, when they saw the Midjourney artist database, they stopped using it right away because they realized what the implications were and they understood that it wasn't their skill, it was other people's skills, and they understood the moral implications, right? Other people just turned a blind eye and kept going because it was too painful to understand what was happening, and they just wanted to keep spiking their dopamine and they wanted to stay in these communities without thinking too critically, right? Again, this is generalizing, but a lot of people who are using these image models never knew who any of us were before, which means that their interest in art wasn't that deep. It never went that deep to find out who Kim Jong-il was, who Greg Rukowski was, who John Singer Sargent was. Like, none of that, right? There was no real interest. This just became junk food.
Yeah.
It's interest based on dopamine, accessibility, and addiction, right? And it's causing harm.
Here is another little experiment for you. Let's find a few great examples of generated images from Midjourney and compare the complexity and sophistication of prompts used to generate them. Is there a correlation between how detailed a prompt is and the quality of the generated image? In most cases, there isn't, which proves that there is a huge factor of luck and randomness involved in generative AI art. Democratization of art is an interesting but flawed concept. Most AI artists who believe in this sentiment, however, would still prefer to own copyrights for their generated images. They don't mind exploiting other artists' work, but they want their work to be marketable and profit from it. There is a big divide between the AI artists and non-AI artists, or as Javi Lopez, founder of Magnific AI, likes to call them, the anti-AI cluster. The art community has always been welcoming and helpful to anyone interested to get started or gain skills. I hate to see this unjustified hatred towards traditional and digital artists, as if they were holding on to their secrets and acting as gatekeepers, thinking that finally now with generative AI anyone can become an artist. A lot of people look at this movement as a revolution, where the snobby artists are finally getting what they deserve, while in reality, nothing can be further from the truth. At the moment, the main reason why big brands and companies are careful about adopting generated images and videos in their communication is that AI art cannot be copyrighted. The US Copyright Office noted that image generators produce images in an unpredictable way, and thus cannot be considered creative or inventive.
Typing in a prompt and having generative AI create the image, we don't think that output is copyrightable by itself, because we think that the last step of expression is being done by the AI, not you. You're typing your prompt, you're like, pink bear riding a bicycle. The AI is choosing in the first instance what kind of bear, the shade of pink, all the things that are supposed to be the expression that the artist is supposed to have in order to get a copyright. So we think that just typing in a prompt is probably not going to create a copyrightable expression.
The copyright law is quite clear that human authorship is required for copyright. Adobe's Content Authenticity Initiative and Content Credentials were created to enable creators to add extra information about themselves and their creative process directly to their content in the form of a new kind of tamper-evident metadata. This could be a solution for proving the ratio between the work achieved by AI and the human artist. But we will have to see how widely it will be accepted and how effective it will become.
If you're a creative professional, you're never satisfied with what comes out of one of these generative AI models, because it's not exactly what you wanted, right? You're always going to make it whatever your vision is. And we refer to it as the first step in the creative process, and all the other steps are going to be copyrightable.
The opinion on generative AI is extremely divisive, and I hope if you ended up watching this video this far, you can see why. Most artists agree that they would consider using AI if the training data was clear of copyright violations. Using AI is similar to tapping into the collective imagination of humankind, and it can be useful for ideation. For the first time, you can brainstorm on your own and get surprising ideas you may have never thought of. Creativity is fueled by the unexpected, and AI has no fear of failing. So it will often make surprising mistakes that can lead to breakthroughs and brilliant new ideas. Sam Harper said that AI art makes glorious mistakes and therefore makes glorious art. He also said that AI is in its early days and it's making lots and lots of mistakes. These are the days of AI being a good artist. Once it gets too good at doing what it was designed for, it will no longer make mistakes. One question that I'm particularly interested in is whether there is a way to make a completely ethical generative AI tool. Adobe has an AI ethics program, for instance, following 3 guiding principles: accountability, responsibility, and transparency, which spells art, by the way. But it can be argued that shoving all of Adobe's stock into a training dataset was not all that ethical, since the contributors only found out about this after their images were already used to train Firefly. It is also fairly easy to find generated images with copyrighted materials on famous IPs on Adobe stock. I'm pretty sure Disney and Nickelodeon would not be happy to find out that Adobe is licensing their intellectual properties. I am sure that Adobe is doing its best to filter these out, but it's not an easy task when the contributors are trying to be tricky when naming these assets. What I hope will happen in the near future is that the law will define the requirements for generative AI datasets. So, what would an ideal ethical legislation look like for generative AI? Training datasets to be 100% transparent. Only use work in a dataset by artists who gave their consent. Royalties and compensation should be paid out to artists who opted in. Generated images need to be catalogued and easy to track. Direct or exact style mimicry should not be allowed. Perhaps the combination of minimum 2 artist styles could work, or simply completely ban the usage of names of creators. Generated images can only be used for reference purposes, and fully AI-generated work should not be acceptable as a finished concept. The UK House of Lords publication on generative AI states that the government should prioritize fairness and responsible innovation. It must resolve disputes definitely, including through updated legislation if needed, empower rights holders to check if their data has been used without permission, and invest in large, high-quality training datasets to encourage tech firms to use licensed material. This is a very promising direction, and I hope it won't take long before this gets more traction around the world. The real danger of generative AI is the effect it's having on up-and-coming artists. Many talents may have been lost already to discouragement by generative AI. Many might ask the same question: why should I spend over 10,000 hours perfecting my skills and wrapping my head around complex and confusing things like anatomy, perspective, and color theory, when I can just write a few words and get dozens of beautiful generated images?
I already assume that every day I'm seeing several AI images that I'm not clocking, right? The problem with AI is that you're only noticing the ones that you notice.
Yeah.
Right? The ones that are of sufficient quality, you're just scrolling right past them. You're just accepting them for what they are. And I have seen groups of professional artists, in a sort of formalized way, try to see how much can they identify AI art and, who can get a perfect score, right? And in a considerable group of artists, maybe 20 or something like that, there's only one person who will clock them all. And most everybody will make some amount of mistakes and not just one. So I'm deeply, deeply concerned about this. I think this problem is only going to get worse. And it's bad for the artists, and it's also bad for the atmosphere around art online. The issue with stuff like this is that once there's enough of this online, and I think we're basically already there, you'll just start assuming most stuff is AI. And when that happens, we're on a slippery slope that I really don't know how we come back from once that happens. That's a very bad position to put new artists into, and artists who are trying to break in and get popular. It's horrible to think that I would be less inclined to recognize them as a great talent just because I'm like, well, where'd you come from? And if you came out of nowhere, you're probably AI. You don't have a natural progression. Where have you been? It's like, that is a horrible atmosphere to have around art sharing and and social media. I think that's only going to make us more insular. Like you said, it's going to make us more inclined to only interact with the people that we already follow. It's going to be much harder to onboard someone new as a favorite artist or a great artist,
Think about the young people right now. I get so many comments and messages from people telling me how they feel hopeless. There are literally kids out there art babies who are in art schools going through a 4-year program to hopefully work in the industry, and they feel like there's no hope for them. If you're an artist with a voice, with a platform, you don't have to do it for yourself. Do it for the younger generation. There are so many people, young people, who are counting on you. I don't know about you guys, but I want a future where there's an option to pursue the passion of art as a career. I want a future where the kids want to draw, want to create, want to make things that mean something to them.
Stan Prokopenko, or Proko, in the Draftsman podcast said,
"Drawing is a visual language, it's a form of communication, and just because a robot can speak doesn't mean we should stop speaking."
Generative AI models are devouring art in order to come close to the greatness created by real artists, but they will never have a soul or feelings to express.
But I do think that also at some point, if not already, a lot of people and a lot of companies are coming to the realization that human skill matters. Creativity really does matter. You know, a lot of book covers, a lot of publishers, a lot of companies, creative companies are already instituting no AI policies. How long does it take for AI to become the sort of the bottom line, the minimal version of what we can get? And if you want something that is really surprising and really thought-provoking and challenging, you'll still need to come back to humans. And at that point, I don't know how many human artists will be still thriving, but I do think at some point, human art is going to be valued higher than AI art, if not already. That AI is always going to be second rate. It's always going to be the cheap version when you can't hire someone with real skill and creativity. You go back on Midjourney and you get this, something that you can have for 50 cents. And so there's going to be this constant race of how do we tell the difference? How do we identify real human skill versus something that just came out of a, pixel predictor? So that will be interesting to see how it develops and what kind of tools come up with to tell that difference, to identify something as, true human creativity versus a copy.
One of the best things that happened recently on YouTube that demonstrates the beauty and importance of discipline and hard work is the amazing art journey of one of YouTube's biggest influencers, PewDiePie. Felix decided he was going to improve his drawing skills and drew at first for 30 days, then continued his challenge till he reached 100 days. His progress, passion and dedication is so inspiring and sets a great example for those discouraged from learning to draw. Some companies like Procreate are taking a firm standpoint that they are not going to introduce anything to do with generative AI to their products. They are a small team passionate about art and creation, and they always value their users over making profit. Their product, Procreate, has been the #1 bestseller app on the App Store for iPad for over 5 years, and now their latest app, Procreate Dreams, became a close second on the bestseller chart. They are a prime example of a tech company who believes in providing people tools to express themselves easily, but they realize that AI is not about making the process of creation easier, it is about automating or replacing the process itself.
We're putting the whole creative future of humanity at risk here. Because another issue with this is not just that, let's say you want to be an illustrator and now you go straight to doing this kind of stuff. You're skipping the important steps of learning about the art fundamentals. It's not just art fundamentals as, learning perspective or learning construction and color theory. It's like you go through a journey when you're learning these things. Like you're not just going to school and you don't enter the school as the same person as you leave the school as, because there is just an emotional journey there. What does it mean to even be creative or to express yourself? That is what's at stake when you're dealing with technology like this.
Generative AI is here to stay. There is no stopping or slowing down this technology. Should you use generative AI for your creative work? I will let you decide that. But whatever you do, I encourage you to use this technology carefully. I am hopeful that generative AI will evolve and become more ethical in the future. But until then, we have to be very selective in how we use it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to share your opinion in the comments, and I hope to see you in the next one.